Welcome to the Greenfield Report with Henry R. Greenfield, your gateway to understanding today's geopolitical landscape. With 50 years of experience across 10 countries, Henry shares expert insights on world affairs, offering practical solutions and engaging guest perspectives. Dive into the Greenfield Report for lively discussions on the issues that matter.
This is Henry R. Greenfield with a special edition of the Greenfield Report. Today we are with Mr. Christopher Fussner, entrepreneur, passionate deliverer of medical services to some of the poorest people in the world, now totaling over several million over the past 30 years, especially in Nepal. A man whose career has ranged around the globe, from Africa to Asia to Europe and many places in between. Originally from good old Long Island and now in Singapore, over 38 years there, he continues to be a force for good over evil around the world. And definitely, Chris is somebody out there for the betterment of all. We are all so privileged to be able to do this very rare interview with Chris, whom I have known for 45 years, since we studied Mandarin together at Thunderbird in the early 1980s. Our paths have continued to cross again and again, as while we are on different sides of the proverbial aisle with Chris's contacts, including good friendships with the former Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich, to prime ministers, to the current president of Bangladesh, where he will be an election observer in the coming months. Chris has truly done it all. But don't let me tell you all of his stories, as this could go on for hours. Instead, let's hear from the man himself, Mr. Christopher Fussner. Welcome to the Greenfield Report.
Great to be here, Bob. It's been only a few months since we talked about this in Singapore, and great to be part of your podcast and share some of my experience in Asia. I first went to Asia in 1973 with a backpack. Went overland through the Khyber Pass, and then lived in Nepal for 5 months. There I met an American Jesuit, Father Watran, who Robert also knows, and he had a medical mobile clinic program there, and it went to one location. But over the last, I'd say, 30 years, we've expanded it now to 5 locations, and we normally get about 150,000 patient visits a year. And we go into the poorest of the poor areas in mountain areas in Nepal, and we do it with these, God bless them, these Catholic sisters that go in four-wheel drive vehicles and drive along the Hail Mary Highway. You know how the roads are in Nepal, and reach the poorest of the poor. So that was the beginning. And then when I went to GW, I quickly got into, Asian studies, China policy, China language. One of my classmates back then has become America's top China expert. His name is David Shambao, and he's written a book recently, Breaking the Engagement: How China Won and Lost America. A truly great read.
Well, Chris, that's quite an introduction. As you know, I also have some background in Nepal. And I think it's a remarkable thing that people, I know you don't promote this very much. Let's be honest. You're very modest about this, but at 150,000 people that you serve on average a year, and you've been doing that over, 25, 30 years now, it's an extraordinary accomplishment. And if you could just for a moment explain to listeners, because I think, Chris, this is moving forward a way for the United States and also for NGOs and for individuals to make a major difference in terms of providing health care to the poorest of the poor. And I don't mean any longer through big agencies like USAID, which no longer exists, but people like yourself. This is an amazing effort to get that much health care out there all by yourself, basically. Can you explain how that's done?
It's relatively easy. For many years, I worked with the Jesuits in Nepal. Recently, the Jesuits have not wanted to do this program, so I had to move it to Caritas. But it's very simple. I write a check, send money over through a U.S. entity and Caritas, and then the sisters get funding on four-wheel drive vehicles, and every day, but 6 days a week, they go to these remote villages where they're invited. They have local connections with local people. Usually we use schools to have these meetings, have these health clinics. And every once in a while, we do a health camp where we go to a very, very, very remote area. And that's when you see some people with significant health issues. And the general health is not all that good. So we try to get out and reach the poorest of the poor. And we're looking to expand the program and then see how it goes. We only use pill, liquid, and like creams, so nothing injectable. But we go through many people. So if someone is very seriously ill, we refer them to a district hospital, but we do keep an eye on them. And if they need any medicine or any help, then we'll help them out.
One of the fascinating things about that, Chris, and we have a colleague of ours, Mr. Richard Helpy, who's been working with a guy called Nate Kaufman in the United States, looking at the U.S. system, which is very expensive, as you know. And what has always fascinated me about your situation was how you have been able to use everything from medicines from India, which are way less expensive, pharmaceuticals from India, than, let's say, the United States. And my point here is that the federal government is not involved in any way. In fact, you have very minimal government involvement, and yet you are able to serve a lot of people. Do you think that this could be used as a model in other countries, or is this simply a one-off that you have created?
Okay, I have to tell you this. I had an idea a few years ago of going to the Jesuit Secretary General in Rome and telling them my story and seeing if they could photocopy this around the world, where you have a wealthy or a group of people contributing money to the Jesuits, and the Jesuits do admin, and then they work with groups of Catholic sisters or lay people, whoever, and deliver basic health care to a goodly amount of people. You have to realize when you go into rural areas, not everyone's sick. You only have like 2% of the population sick. Most of them are in pretty good shape. So I think it's actionable. And now, by the way, a lot of the medicines are made in Nepal, and the cost is negligible. And we use most common medicines like antibiotics, salves, creams, things like that, cough syrup, cough medicine. But when you sit down and you look at people coming, you see some guy coughing, so you know he has a cold or he smokes too much, or someone's holding their leg and they have arthritis. And after a while, you can sort of diagnose the patients. But anyhow, I'll be going to Nepal again in November. I was just there a month ago.
So, Chris, you went to see them, I guess, in Italy, to Rome, you're saying.
No, I haven't. I was thinking about doing it. I have not done it.
Okay. And let's just say that actually worked. Do you think that they would be capable of doing that, let's say, in, I don't know, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 countries around the world? Is that possible?
You would need to get a champion somewhere to do it. You would need someone, either a Jesuit or someone in the Vatican, who would want to do it.
Well, I think you have a great method there, and I'm very keen on seeing that done. In fact, I'm going to talk to Mr. Helpy about this, and maybe you can be on his program and discuss this specifically with some of the healthcare experts, because to me, the days of large agencies out of the United States government are over. Would you agree with that? I don't think that's coming back.
Unfortunately, I think you're correct. One of the things I disagree with vehemently and you know I'm a Republican, I disagree with the Trump administration is getting rid of USAID. Okay, you have to realize during the Obama administration, aid was really gone a little crazy, a little DEI. And then there was a gentleman who I know, Mark Green. Mark Green used to be head of IRI, International Republican Institute. So he was tasked with taking over USAID after Biden. So what he did, after Obama. So what he did is he got the budget from 40 billion down to 20 billion. Okay, with Obama. Then he got it down to 20 billion. But what happened is Samantha Power, who wrote a great book, The Problem from Hell on Genocide, she took AID and went from 20 billion to 40 billion and had all these DEI programs in it, all this fluff. And that's why, unfortunately, you had Elon Musk with his chainsaw and destroyed USA. USA did great work with food aid. I used to work with them in West Africa, in Ouagadougou, now called Burkina Faso, and they did great work with refugees on the Thai-Burmese border, and with all the refugees, food aid, and then USAID also funded democracy programs, which are very important, including NED, National Endowment for Democracy, and IRI, which is the International Republican Institute, and NDI, which is National Democratic Institute, which is Democratic Party. All of these were started after President Reagan's famous Westminster speech. And IRI was the child, the program of Senator John McCain.
You know, a lot of people get lost, especially Americans, do not understand all these various organizations that you're talking about here, which you have worked with, for half a century. And I think that a lot of them provide a lot of good. Some of them get some funding from the U.S. government. What is going to happen with those kinds of organizations, IRI and the rest of those moving forward? Are they dependent a little bit on U.S. government support?
IRI and NDI used to get support from USAID, which has ended, but NED got money from the U.S. via the U.S. Senate from the U.S. government directly. So, but IRI and NDI had to seriously cut back on their programs. They had to lay off at least 75% of their staff. They had to close down programs in Nepal, Bangladesh, and a number of other countries. So what I've done with IRI in the past and also in the future is I've gone on election observation missions. First one I did was Mongolia, then I did Timor-Leste, then it was Tunisia, and then Moldova. So these were important missions, and I've just did 2 pre-election missions, one to Bangladesh and the other one to Nepal. And I'll be, if my health hangs in there, unfortunately I got pneumonia when I was in Nepal, I'm slated to go and do the election observation mission in Bangladesh. I've known Muhammad Yunus for about 20 years because I've been supporting the Grameen Bank internship program at the George Washington University.
Chris, how many people would you say are like you that are doing this? Never mind. I assume most Republicans are who you mostly are working with, but are there a lot of people like that doing this type of effort, or are you like just one of the few out there? Because I mean, it's such a laudable set of activities that you're working on. And again, I'm always trying to look for solutions that, can be replicated beyond the individual, or is that just not possible?
Okay, part of it, IRI would still get, or NDI would still get some funding. So you have their local people, which they'll take back on contract. Then you have volunteers like myself, and the missions are maybe like in Bangladesh, will maybe be 15 people, and the other missions were maybe 20, 25 people. So bigger than that. Moldova, it was a larger mission, but you also have to remember in certain countries, you also have other missions financed by Swedish development, financed by the EU, or financed by some of the German foundations, like the Konrad Adenauer Foundation.
So, Chris, this change in soft power, people talk about that a lot. Do you think that this is going to lessen the United States' influence around the world if we are not funding this kind of soft power? Never mind the fact that I understand about, Stephanie Powers, and she was doing a lot of things that bloated or changed the mission of USAID. But just in general, is this going to lessen the U.S. soft power influence around the world if the U.S. government is not doing this any longer?
Yes, it already is, like on the Thai-Burma border. And people have noticed worldwide that a lot of these programs have been canceled. I was in the U.S. Embassy in Dhaka and meeting people there. And we had to go from one section of the embassy to the other. And the person with us said, "Oh, this is where USAID used to be." So there was like 10 empty rooms.
Wow, that's a significant change. That leads us to, we have those subjects that I would like you to cover, but basically, let's jump into that right now with the new national security policy strategy for 2025. I think you're quite familiar with that. I think you even know the author of it. You were explaining that to me a little bit earlier today. How does that strategy affect the United States, not just internationally, but the U.S. standing in the world? Is that something that is going to be a positive thing for the United States, or because it is somewhat a dramatic change, is it not?
Yes and no. I've read through it a few times, and it is America first policy. And it does make, the policy does make some sense. The person who wrote it is Dr. Nadia Shadlow, and she wrote it for Trump in 2017. So certain aspects make sense and should have been addressed a while ago. One was free trade and how having China go into the World Trade Organization, and this free trade was only a one-way free trade, and it hollowed out America's industrial might and towns in the Midwest, etc. So it did have a major negative effect on the United States, and Trump wants to sort of bring it back. At the same time, he says U.S. technology. We have to start putting money in U.S. technology. So, the CHIPS Act, which was Senator Schumer and Senator Todd Young. I know Todd Young for a few years. This is getting back into American tech. So a few of the things she mentioned in this thing is protect American citizens, protect American assets, and protect even American allies. So some of it really makes sense. The paper wants to go into AI, biotech, and quantum, where we are lagging. I'm very good friends with a quantum physicist in Singapore. He's Greek. And he tells me China is really catching up super fast, and they're dumping billions of dollars into quantum computing, quantum physics. So some of the stuff is pretty good. So another thing that he mentions is fairness. Okay. Europe has gotten a free ride from us for how many years? 50 years? And it's only recently that he told the Europeans, you're going to hit 5%. So some Europeans, like Germany, are hitting 5%. But you have to realize that Spain and Italy are still at 2 and 3%.
You're talking about their GDP for defense.
Yeah, GDP for defense, which is their contribution, i.e. to NATO. So it's not just U.S. forces and U.S. planes and tanks there.
So if you look at this, Chris, by the way, I've also read it. I'm not sure how many people have. It's actually not a bad read at all. It's only 30. No. It's 33 pages, and
quick. You go quick. Yeah.
You go right through it, and 90% of it, I think it's hard to argue with it, right? Yeah. It's like anything, though, with in my view, with Trump, of reading the tea leaves, right? He's got the broad outline, and America first, all the things you said on AI and every other thing. But I think you're also a very strong internationalist, right?
Yes.
And so my question to you is, it seems to me, and tell me, hey, you're wrong, Robert, you're wrong on this, but it seems to me that this is somewhat of a retreat back to the Western Hemisphere, and it's telling Europe, hey, you sort out what you want to do in Europe. I don't want to be there anymore. We don't want to be your backers anymore. We'll be your wingman, maybe, right? And that's manifested. We'll get into it in just a moment about Ukraine.
Okay, what I think it is, I think it's Trump's negotiation style.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, that's what I think. And it's worked. It's worked. So recently, you have to say, Germany is now committed to 5%. Germany just put in a conscription law, which is not very popular, because Germany realizes that they have to do more for their own defense. I think America will always be there for Europe, but I think Europe has to do a lot more for Europe. As they say in America, belly up to the bar.
Think about that for a while. You know better than anyone, because you're also, I don't want to say good friends, but you are certainly know John Bolton quite well. Yes. I know that you speak to him, people like Mr. Bolton, former national security advisor, quite often. You have strong views on the United States and their 800 bases around the world. So let's take that Trump National Security Strategy 2025 and the good doctor that you mentioned earlier. Are we going to see bases closed? Are we going to see less emphasis in certain areas? And is that a good thing?
There's been no bases closed. I talked to a friend of mine today in Greece, the quantum physicist. He lives like 5 miles from Suda Bay. Suda Bay is the largest U.S. naval base in the Mediterranean. So there's no bases are not closing. I have not heard anything. I think the whole point is Trump wants the Europeans to do more, and the Europeans are doing more. They just came out with $105 billion loan for Ukraine, where, the Europeans were lagging. The Germans would not release Taurus missiles to the Ukrainians. As you know, I've been to Ukraine 4 times since the war. First time was a political meeting where we met Poroshenko and other people in other political parties. Then I got involved in this group called Ukraine Focus, which delivers ambulances to Ukraine. So I funded it. A gentleman named Brock Berman is in charge of it. It was his brainchild. I was introduced to Brock by one of Poroshenko's aides, and that's how I got to know him.
You've got to tell that story a little bit. You're making it sound pretty normal, but tell our listeners what you did. You picked up the ambulances, and then what did you do?
Okay, so one thing, they have to buy the ambulances. These are used ambulances, and you get them from all over Europe. And a lot of the European cities, when the ambulance is 10 years old, they get rid of it. But the ambulance is still good. I've driven them, right? They're still, a lot of ambulances don't get a lot of work because they only get work when they get a call. So they're not like taxi cabs where they're constantly on the go. So anyhow, the first mission we picked them up in Košice in Slovakia, and then drove them across the Ukraine border to Kyiv. Then we went all the way down to Pokrovsk in Donbass, and
I understand you got pretty close to the front lines, huh?
No, we were maybe 25 miles, 50 kilometers or so from the front line.
That's still relatively close.
Well, it's close if a drone sees you, or if it's close if a Shahed missile hits you. But we couldn't hear anything, and we couldn't smell anything. But when you go through all these roadblocks, and people, okay, go. But the last roadblock that went into Pokrovsk, it was of course we had our escort officer, who is an officer in the TDF, the Territorial Defense Force, who gets the ambulances, and he has all the paperwork. He's in uniform. He's a doctor, and but it was like, basically, what are you doing here? So you drop off the ambulances at a military base, which is now it's a converted school because you can't have schools that close to the front line. And the town at that time was relatively empty. Now it's a battered shell, and it's very heavy fighting. So, as an aside, this is the town and the area that Putin wants to take over. But there's been so many Ukraine lives, but many, many more Russian lives have been lost for that piece of territory.
I think for the listeners, the best part I like about this, how many times have you done this now, taking in ambulances from different points in Europe, driving them into...
Three. So the first one was Košice to Pokrovsk. The second one, we went... Brock Berman has a friend in his Battlefield and Monuments Commission. So we got very good seats at the 80th anniversary of D-Day. And then from Utah Beach, we drove 45 ambulances across Europe into Kyiv and into, Yeah, basically a military base outside of Kyiv. And then the third mission, we went from Belgium, and we went from Belgium to Kyiv. Then we took 2 more ambulances from Kyiv to a town called Shotska, which again is 50 miles from 50 kilometers from the front line.
Well, I hope you have a couple of shots of vodka along the way in order to fortify you as you get.
No, we're driving vehicles, so no shots of vodka. When we're finished, yes, there's shots of vodka.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
One of the things that we see, long as we're burrowing in here on this one, this has allowed you to go deep into Ukraine. And I know from you and I speaking about this, you have a very strong feelings about the support for Ukraine. And I'd like to ask you, as this Europeanizing of the war happens, the $105 billion package, which you and I've already discussed, in that, yes, it's Europe is now stepping up, bellying up to the bar, as you say. What actually is going to happen here? What is going to stop this war? Is it going to actually grind on until Putin gets what he wants? Or will there be European boots on the ground to stop it? Or what's going to stop this war?
This is what I think, and it's only me thinking. Okay, the first those 28 points was a negotiation ploy, a negotiation strategy. So a few things. One, Putin would not agree to many of the points, and the Ukrainians would not agree to releasing territory in Donbass and releasing territory that has been illegally conquered by Russia. So that's the sticking point. And Putin will not continue with the negotiations until that. Putin wants that area. And Putin today said, if you don't give it to me by negotiation, I'm going to take it. So what's going to happen? I think the war is going to continue. I think the Ukrainians are getting tired, but the Russians are getting tired. The Russians have almost suffered 1 million casualties. The Russians, when they were in Afghanistan, had, I guess, about 50, 60,000 casualties, sort of like what we had in Vietnam. But this is on a much greater scale. The Ukrainians, you have to realize, Ukraine had an aircraft manufacturing history. The Antonov, which is the world's largest cargo plane, was made outside of Kyiv. So you have people that are aeronautical engineers and software engineers, electronic engineers, etc. So now Kyiv has these submergible boats that just blew up a Russian submarine. They've been blowing up Russian tankers. They blew up one Russian tanker using a drone off Crete 2 days ago. They have developed their own missile called the Flamingo because the paint got screwed up the first time and the missile came out pink like a flamingo. So they're developing their own drone technology. So I've started studying drone technology, and Ukraine has some pretty good drone technology and anti-drone technology too.
Yes, they do. I get that. I didn't mean to interrupt you there, but what I wanted to ask you is this. You just said, I think the key words here. Number one, Ukraine's population, you know perfectly well, it's dropped from 51 million in the early 1990s. It's down to 37 million today.
Oh, yeah, of course. Okay, immediately you had Ukraine men, women, and children, but a lot of women and children went to safe haven countries and went to Germany, UK, United States, Canada, all over the world. So, but there's still people. Okay, when you drive into Ukraine, you go to Lviv. Lviv is a beautiful, functioning town. You walk around Kyiv. Kyiv is fine. You have restaurants. You have cafes. You have people on bicycles. When you're driving, in the western part of Ukraine, you see some guy at 5 o'clock walking his cow back to the barn. So it's in that battle zone where you see the destroyed cities. Like I went to Bucha, and Bucha is the town north of Kyiv that the Russians couldn't take Kyiv, so they basically blew up Bucha, and they had a massacre at Bucha of civilians.
So, Chris, just taking that one step further, you're basically saying to me, Ukraine, let's just put it out there. Ukraine can hold out if they get this money, if they get the aid, if they get more, defensive weapons from the Europeans, they can hold out. So let's just say that's true. But Putin, to me, he's like a Hitler. He's just gonna. You just said 50,000 they lost in Afghanistan, and that was enough. They ran away. He's got 1 million casualties. He's not going anywhere. Is Putin that type of personality, a Hitlerian personality that he will?
But what's his background? He's a KGB agent. Fiona Hill, who was Trump's first Russian advisor during the first time, is a Russian expert, wrote a biography on Putin, which I've read. Interesting. Unfortunately, the section when he was a KGB agent in Dresden was relatively light, actually missing. But yeah, that's his personality.
So he's going to just keep going down the road. So what I'm trying to get here is,
unless it comes to the point where he realizes it, especially if the Ukrainians can start retaking territory, and with increased firepower and increased Patriot missiles for defense, so Kyiv and the apartment buildings don't get hit, this is essential. When you go to there's a airport in Reshawa in southern Poland, and this is where the C-17s land with U.S. aid. I've been to that airport, and there's 8 Patriot missile systems ringing the airport. So, once you get some Patriot missile systems more into Ukraine, more firepower into Ukraine, you're going to have to, the Ukrainians already know what they have to do. They have to automate the war because they don't have the population. If they can automate the war through missile and drone technology, then they have a shot.
As far as you're concerned, Ukraine can automate the war, can push them back, and eventually be successful, let's just say. But the question I have here is, you do not think that will require boots on the ground by the Europeans?
No, because if you put boots on the ground there, it's a trigger point. It's a trigger point. And then you'll have Russians. Already the Russians have been very aggressive with the Europeans. There has been drones over every major European airport, Russian drones. There has been sabotage in Germany and in UK, and it's all pointing the finger at Russian sabotage.
So the bottom line here is, you seem to be saying, give Ukraine the means to win this war, or to push it to the point where Putin has no choice but to actually agree to a ceasefire in some kind of demarcation or demilitarized zone. Is that what you're saying?
Well, it depends on how much territory. It's now down to land. They've already, it's already been decided that Ukraine will not be in NATO, and it's already been decided that Ukraine will be in the EU. Now the question comes into territory that the Russians illegally seized. You have to realize what the history is in this section of the world. The Russians illegally seized 2 sections of Georgia, and we did nothing under Obama. The Russians have, in effect, seized 1 section of Moldova with his Russian speakers. And then the Russians seized Crimea, and we did nothing. So it's now where they've seized, where they invaded, Ukraine, where there was some Western pushback.
So the bottom line here, though, going back, I know what you're saying. I totally agree with you.
This is 1939. This is Sudetenland.
And you believe, though, unlike in 1939 Sudetenland, where obviously Czechoslovakia had no chance to stop the Germans, you believe that Ukraine, with the right firepower and with the right technology and with the right support and the fact that the Europeans are Europeanizing this war, they have a chance now.
Yes. Now, what happened about 3 months ago, the Europeans bought about $5 billion of U.S. weapon systems. If this happens again and again, this is a good thing. But things have been on hold because people were hoping that this peace negotiation would happen. But the peace negotiation has not happened.
And what you're saying is, in effect, it cannot happen until Putin is forced into doing that, or, in effect, the Ukrainians surrender more territory, which they have, in fact, actually not lost. Correct?
Yeah, but they will not. They will not release it.
Okay. Well, let's listen. I thank you for that. Let's move on to the other subject that you are absolutely the expert on. Having your great friend Shambal, you gave me that book to read, and that is, how is the United States going to look at Asia, China, South China Sea, Taiwan, and in the interest of time here, is the Trump National Security Strategy 2025 the right track after some stumbles that you and I have discussed, or not?
Well, in the paper, it mentions the first island chain, and it mentions free navigation, not paying tolls through the South China Sea. So they put up there, do not give us a hard time on the South China Sea. So that's part of the position paper. And then you also have to realize they took a hard line on Taiwan. And 2 days ago, we sold Taiwan $11 billion worth of military hardware, including HIMARS and drones and anti-ship missiles, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And this is not even taking into consideration the Taiwan's own military-industrial complex, which I perceive should be on high manufacturing alert.
So if you look, Chris, at the additional players here, which is Japan, where Trump seems to have a good relationship with the new leader of Japan, a woman, and then you look at South Korea, and getting them to be more active. What do you think that the China reaction will be from a security point, not the economics here, but from a security point of view? The Quad is still in effect, even though it looks like Modi's a little bit shaky on his side.
Modi's very shaky. I don't know why the United States tolerates him, to be honest. He wants he wants he wants to date two women at the same time, Modi and Trump. I don't think that's going to work. So let's go back to South Korea and Japan. So the recent dust up with a Japanese prime minister, now there's an economic boycott of tourism, of seafood, and of really buying Japanese products. But they've done this. They did this when THAAD missiles went to South Korea. So what's happening now is you're getting Japan is becoming very friendly with South Korea. Japan is also very friendly now and had joint ship maneuvers with Philippines and also Vietnam. So people are acknowledging China's bullying in Asia.
I totally agree with you on that. It seems to me, though, the question that I want to get here is you do feel that Trump, with this new national security strategy, is going to be more effective than he was on, let's say, on his kind of ad hoc way of going through Asia the last time and not necessarily being very prepared in dealing with China. And now, in effect, he's recognizing that, China, he's going to have to share the world with China. And that's a very different thing than the way that the United States was looking at it in the past. Do you agree?
No, I think it's not share. I think the one thing you have to look at is his $11 billion arms sale to Taiwan. That is significant. The Chinese are exceedingly upset. It rearms Taiwan.
But you don't see at any point China actually moving on Taiwan in any kind of invasion or.
I hope and pray not, because it would turn into more of a regional war, and there'd be a lot of dead people in Taiwan, but there'd be a lot of dead people in China too. It would not be good for the region. It wouldn't be good for China. It wouldn't be good for Taiwan. It would be horrible.
So there is the place that you're living in, Singapore,
yes,
which is the kind of like one of the core places of ASEAN. And as you took me to several events when I was there, ASEAN is not the EU, and they do not want to be the EU. Does ASEAN have any kind of special role in this, or are they still going to remain kind of a background player when it comes to the United States, in China and the region?
ASEAN, okay, there's ASEAN, which is ASEAN, but then there's the ASEAN nations. Okay, so they're all members of ASEAN, but they all have their independent foreign policy. So ASEAN, right now, it's ASEAN's time to shine. Anwar Ibrahim, very good, capable man, is trying to negotiate a peace settlement between Thailand and Cambodia. There's been many people killed on both sides of the border. And of today, the border, it's still raging. And Thailand is using U.S.-made F-16s to bomb bridges and to bomb military targets in Cambodia. Cambodia is firing these missiles into Thailand. You had, I don't know, almost 1 million people had to be moved from their homes on both sides of the border. So hopefully ASEAN can at least solve an ASEAN problem. So, but back to what you're saying, each ASEAN country has their own foreign policy, and it's not like EU where it's everyone's EU, right? They're all different. They're all very different. So you have to see. So in vis-a-vis China, okay. So you have Philippines that's having big problems with China. Vietnam's having problems with China, right? Cambodia is almost a wholly owned subsidiary of China. Same with Laos.
Exactly.
Okay. Thailand is trying to play everybody, as the Thais always do. They're being friends with America and friends with China. Singapore is being very friendly with China, but at the same time, you have to realize Changi Navy Base was built to handle aircraft carriers. Singapore has no aircraft carriers. It was built to handle U.S. aircraft carriers, and U.S. aircraft carriers often call on Singapore. And they have ship replenishments and ship repair facilities there.
So, Chris, before we sign off here, is there anything else that you can add with any other players in the region, such as does Australia still have any real significance, or are they kind of just an outside the norm?
No, they keep that section of the world happy. Australia's sphere of influence is very important with the Pacific nations because the Chinese now are moving into and establishing aid relations and trading relations with important South Pacific nations like Vanuatu, Solomon Islands, etc. So Australia has a relatively small but effective military.
And they're also investing with the United States in things like AUKUS as well as the Quad. So
they're buying nuclear submarines from us.
That's a big darn deal.
That's not cheap. That's not like buying a 50-foot gunboat,
So, Chris, if we look at the global strategy by Trump, is there anything that would be different than, let's say, if there was the Fussner doctrine or the Fussner global strategy? Would you say that yours would be somewhat similar to Trump, and that he's on the right path? Or is there anything significant that you would like to see changed moving forward for the United States to remain in its dominant position, especially on the security side?
A few things where I disagree with Trump and what I would want to do. One, I'd reinstate USAID. I think it's important we have USAID. Maybe we have it at a $10 billion level or $15 billion level. But I think the work of USAID is very important. You have to realize when we withdrew from Cambodia, it was the Chinese went right in. So one, I would continue with USAID in terms of food aid, refugee aid, democracy, etc. Second, I would support Ukraine more. I'd be less friendly with Putin. And I would support Ukraine heavily. The Europeans, I think we have to continually engage with them, as the president has done. There's been many meetings. You read about it, it's like every other week, the Europeans are getting together and talking about Ukraine. And then the U.S. and Trump always meeting the Europeans and getting that done. So I think Europe has to belly up to the bar and increase defense spending, and increase aid to Ukraine, both financially and militarily.
So, Chris, I really want to thank you for this initial conversation. As you know, we originally had envisioned this as a letter from Asia, but to be quite honest, because of your global, expertise, it's turned into quite a national and global security session, as well as some great input. Thank you very much on how to work and how to assist the poor in many places around the world. And I'm really hoping that you have that conversation soon with the Jesuits at their headquarters in Italy, so that you can begin to look at different models of working with healthcare with the poor. So, is Chris, there anything else that you'd like to add before we go? Because we're going to be back here speaking to you again about some of these subjects and drilling down.
Sure. I'm going to take up your invitation for me to visit you in France. And I have to go to a democracy meeting in Croatia. And then I'm going on another ambulance run from Frankfurt Airport to Kyiv. And I have a bunch of time. So I've always wanted, I'll visit you. And I think I should make a trip to Rome. And I've always wanted to go to Malta. So I'll see you in France, and then we can have another podcast from France.
It sounds like a great idea, and we cannot leave without noting that Chris Fussner is one of the leading importers of wines from around the world into Singapore, and has had developed a wine expertise, a sommelier of a great renown over the last, Chris, 40, 50 years?
Well, I've had the wine company for 33 years. But before that, if you remember, I was part of the Thunderbird Wine Club, and I had my private champagne society.
Well, we'll have to talk about that another time. This is Henry R. Greenfield signing off, speaking again with Mr. Christopher Fussner, one of the world's leading strategists on the international side, ranging from healthcare to defense and, of course, the United States position in it.
Thank you for joining us on the Greenfield Report with Henry R. Greenfield. We hope today's insights into the ever-shifting geopolitical landscape have sparked your curiosity and broadened your perspective. Stay connected with us for more in-depth discussions and expert solutions. Until next time, keep exploring the world beyond the headlines.